Kathy Engelbert's resignation wasn't a quiet exit. It was a fallout of a power shift that's been simmering under the surface of the WNBA for years. Caitlin Clark, arguably the most talked-about name in women's basketball today, didn't just turn down a record-breaking offer. She led a calculated rejection of a deal that failed to reflect the league's true value. The league had just secured over $2 billion in media rights. Yet, when it came time to share the profits, players saw the same old structure: centralized control, underwhelming compensation, and no seat at the decision-making table. Clark and her peers, emboldened by their growing influence, didn't flinch. The players weren't just walking away from a deal. They were dismantling the narrative that they should be grateful for scraps while the league cashes in on their star power.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Engelbert's resignation wasn't just administrative fallout. It was symbolic of a deeper collapse within outdated leadership. This wasn't about salary alone. It was about a league that failed to recognize its own transformation. Women's basketball has moved past the era of appeasement. The athletes, led by a unified front, are now demanding structural change: equity in revenue, autonomy over branding, and a role in shaping the future. The rejection of the CBA marks a decisive pivot away from passive acceptance and toward full-fledged ownership of the game's direction. This moment isn't a standoff, it's a reset. The league thought it had it in the bag: a historic CBA offer, over $1 million on the table, big-name media deals pumping billions into the sport, and a rising star, Caitlin Clark, front and center, pulling in viewership numbers that WNBA had never seen before. It looked like the future of the league was secured, until it all blew up. In a move that caught even seasoned insiders off guard, Caitlin Clark, along with a group of top-tier WNBA players, said no, not just to the deal, to the whole system. They rejected the collective bargaining agreement, publicly and firmly, making it clear they're done settling. They don't want crumbs from a billion-dollar pie. They want a seat at the table, and a slice that actually reflects their worth. The response? Chaos. And within days, WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert resigned. Or, more accurately, reportedly resigned under pressure. The league's top executive, the person who was supposed to navigate this new era of women's sports with grace and vision, suddenly gone. Just like that. So, how did it come to this? It starts with the money. Always does. The WNBA has been bragging about landing media rights deals valued at over $2 billion. That's billion with a B. And yet, when it came time to negotiate a new CBA, the league offered what it thought was a groundbreaking package: just over $1 million in salary for top players. Sound impressive on paper, but not when you realize how much these athletes are actually bringing in. Ticket sales, jersey sales, streaming numbers, partnerships, advertising. Revenue streams are multiplying and the players see it. More importantly, they know they're the ones generating it. This wasn't just a rejection of a contract. It was a strategic stand. A collective message that the days of being underpaid and overmarketed are over. The players aren't asking for favors. They're demanding fair compensation for the value they bring. And Caitlin Clark's rise has only made that clearer. She's not just a player. She's a movement. And when someone like her takes a stand, the ripple effects shake everything. The league didn't see it coming. Or worse, they did and thought they could control it. They believed that offering a historic salary package would buy silence, compliance. But they underestimated just how tuned in these players are, not just to the business, but to their leverage. And they weren't alone. The media scrambled to reframe the story, spinning it as players getting greedy or being unrealistic. But that spin didn't stick. Fans aren't buying it anymore, because we've seen this play out before, and not just in basketball. This is about a bigger cultural shift. Players in women's sports are done with the old model, the one where they're expected to perform at the highest level and smile through exploitation. The new generation knows their power. They know what they bring to the table, and they're not afraid to walk away. The timing couldn't have been worse or more poetic. The WNBA has been riding a wave of popularity, thanks largely to a handful of breakout stars and growing mainstream interest. They had momentum. But instead of doubling down on player investment, The league hesitated, tried to hold the line, and now they're facing a leadership vacuum, growing distrust, and, most dangerously, a lockout on the horizon. Yes, a lockout. With CBA negotiations frozen and the commissioner out, there's growing talk that the 2026 season could be canceled altogether. That's not just bad optics. That's a potential death blow. The WNBA can't afford a stall, not when players are building alternatives in real time. Enter Unrivaled, a new league founded by some of the biggest names in the game, offering not just better pay but equity. A player-first ecosystem where athletes have actual control over their careers, branding, and future. It's already drawing interest, and the WNBA knows it. The monopoly is cracking. If Unrivaled succeeds, the WNBA will be forced to evolve or get left behind. And here's the thing, this was inevitable. The warning signs were there. For years, players have been speaking out about travel issues, overseas contracts, unequal treatment, and being ignored or gaslit when raising concerns. Fans rallied behind them. Sponsors started to pay attention. The league had the chance to lead this new era. Instead, they chose to manage it like it was still 2005. That's what makes Engelbert's resignation so telling. It wasn't just a reaction to the CBA mess. It was a boiling point of years of disconnection between leadership and labor. Her background as a corporate executive was supposed to bring professionalism and structure. But what it really brought was a top-down, out-of-touch management style that simply didn't translate to modern athlete culture. This is no longer a league of grateful employees. It's a coalition of stars, entrepreneurs, and cultural figures. The WNBA's leadership failed to adapt, and now they're paying the price. Caitlin Clark isn't the villain here. She's the catalyst. Her refusal to accept the deal was a statement that echoed across the sports world. Being a star player in a league that undervalues you isn't a dream. It's a trap. And when you have the influence to call it out and demand better, you do. That's not selfish. That's leadership. The irony? The WNBA owes a huge chunk of its recent success to the very players it's now alienating. These are the women who built the brand, grew the fan base, and turned highlight reels into cultural moments. And they're done waiting for respect that should have come years ago. What happens next is anyone's guess. A new commissioner will have to step into a storm, rebuild trust, and offer something real, not just symbolic, if they want to keep the league from unraveling. The clock is ticking. The 2026 season hangs in the balance. And every day that goes by without progress is another day the WNBA risks becoming irrelevant. The fans aren't stupid. They're watching this all unfold, and they know what's up. They see the billion-dollar deals. They see the empty promises. And they see the players stepping up while leadership steps down. This isn't just about basketball. It's about a system finally being held accountable. It's about athletes refusing to be silent. And it's about a league that now has to decide whether it wants to evolve or get replaced. So let's be clear, this moment is historic, but not because a commissioner resigned. It's historic because for the first time, the power is shifting. And it's not in the hands of networks or boardrooms. It's with the players, the ones who fill the seats, sell the jerseys, drive the engagement, and now, finally, get to dictate the terms. If you've been paying attention, you already know the WNBA can't afford to ignore this reckoning. The old playbook isn't working, and unless they rewrite it fast, there might not be a league left to save. If you're following this chaos as closely as we are, hit that like button. Drop a comment below. Do you think the WNBA can recover? Would you support Unrivaled over the W? And don't forget to subscribe for more breakdowns of the wildest moments in sports and pop culture. Because if this is where women's basketball is headed, we've got a front row seat to a revolution. Let's keep going, because the ripple effects from this implosion are far from over. When the commissioner of a league steps down in the middle of negotiations is high stakes, it's not just a personnel change. It's a full-blown signal that leadership has lost control. And no matter how the league tries to spin it, there's no hiding the timing. Kathy Engelbert didn't step aside to pursue new opportunities. She didn't bow out gracefully after a successful tenure. She resigned right after the league's biggest stars publicly rejected her crown jewel, the new CBA. That's not a coincidence. That's fallout. Now here's where it gets worse for the WNBA. This wasn't just Caitlin Clark walking away. This was an organized stand, a coordinated, deliberate rejection by the very players who carried the league through its most visible, profitable years. They knew exactly what they were doing. And when that many high-profile athletes band together and say, "No, we're not signing. It's not a contract dispute. It's a revolution." What made this moment especially brutal for the league is how public it all was. There was no closed-door negotiation, no quiet grumbling behind the scenes. These players went loud, on social media, in interviews, through reps. They made it very clear. The deal might look shiny to the press, but it doesn't scratch the surface of what they're worth. And let's not pretend this was some sudden outburst. This frustration has been building for years. Long before Caitlin Clark even entered the league, veterans like Aya Wilson, Breanna Stewart, and Nafisa Collier were already pushing back on everything from salary caps to sponsorship restrictions to how the league handled player safety. Overseas contracts weren't a luxury. They were necessary just to make ends meet. Players were flying commercial on brutal travel schedules, while the league was signing 9-figure broadcast deals. The math didn't add up. And now, the players are calling it out. And here's the kicker. The league thought this offer would be enough. Over $1 million in salary. That's huge, right? But in context, it's still a fraction of the revenue these women are generating. The core issue? Revenue distribution. That's where the lines are drawn. The players are saying, "Give us a percentage of what we help create. Ticket sales, merch, ad dollars, all of it. Not just a salary, a stake." And the league's response? A slightly bigger check. But still no real share in the billions they're bringing in. That's not progress. That's a PR move. And now, with the CBA rejected and leadership in shambles, the WNBA is scrambling to reframe the narrative, try and position the players as unreasonable. But that narrative doesn't fly anymore. Not when fans are more informed. Not when the numbers are right there. Not when alternative leagues are popping up with real offers. That's the real threat here. Unrivaled. It's not just a scrappy little startup hoping to disrupt the market. It's player-founded, player-funded, and already gaining serious traction. And unlike the WNBA, it's not trying to control athletes. It's empowering them. Equity? Check. Branding rights? Check. Flexibility? Media autonomy? Ownership stakes? Check. This is not just a new league. It's a new model. One that says athletes aren't just talent, they're partners. And the moment stars start walking away from the WNBA to join Unrivaled in droves, that's when the floodgates open. That's when the monopoly collapses. The WNBA is now in a race. Either adapt or bleed talent. And at this rate, they're already behind. And let's talk about the optics, because those matter now more than ever. Caitlin Clark became the face of the league practically overnight. She brought in unprecedented viewership. ESPN numbers soared. She was on magazine covers. Endorsement deals were stacking up, and tickets for her games were selling out arenas. She wasn't just a player. She was a draw. And yet, even with all that leverage, even with all that popularity, the league expected her to quietly sign the deal, to be a good face, a compliant face. But she didn't. And that refusal shattered any illusion that the WNBA still had control of the narrative. If she isn't buying in, the entire structure is in danger. It's a power shift, and it's happening in real time. And let's be honest, the fans saw this coming. There's been a disconnect between league management and the players for years. Whether it was the travel fiascos, the tone-deaf handling of online harassment, or the reluctance to back players speaking out on social issues, the leadership has consistently fumbled moments that mattered. Add to that the fact that the WNBA's marketing budget has always been questionable. The league is dependent on the players to do their own promotion, grow their own brands, and build hype without giving them a cut of returns. That's not just inefficient. That's exploitation with a glossy coat of feminism. And now, the bill is due. Engelbert's resignation is a symptom, not the disease. The real problem is structural. This league has been run like a charity project for too long. Like it's lucky to be here. Like the players should be grateful. But that mindset is dead. Women's sports are profitable. They have massive audiences. They have culture behind them. And any leadership that fails to recognize that isn't just outdated, it's dangerous. So what's next? Well, the league has a decision to make. Fast. They can bring in new leadership that actually listens to players, restructures revenue sharing, and treats athletes like partners. Or they can keep pretending they hold all the cards, while those very cards walk out the door and build something better. Because let's not forget, the players of the league. Without them, there's no product, no games, no highlights, no headlines. If they decide to pivot, they can take their audiences, their sponsors, and their cultural capital with them. And they're already starting to. This isn't a bluff. It's a blueprint. The 2026 season, it's in real danger. Lockouts aren't just hypothetical anymore. They're a looming reality. And with negotiations stalled, trust broken, and players aligning elsewhere, the WNBA could lose everything it's built in the past decade if it doesn't act now. But here's the twist. This could also be a turning point. A real one. If the league steps up, if it reinvents itself, if it listens, if it finally lets go of the control complex and embraces the fact that the future of women's sports is player-driven, not executive-led, it might survive this, maybe even thrive. But that window is closing. The old ways aren't working. The players know it. The fans know it. And now, thanks to the dramatic resignation of the commissioner, the world knows it. This isn't just a labor dispute. It's a cultural shift. And everyone is watching to see if the WNBA can handle the new era or become another cautionary tale of what happens when you underestimate the people who actually make your brand valuable. Let's go deeper, because this mess is still unfolding, and it's getting uglier by the day. With the commissioner out, the CBA dead in the water, and star players drawing lines in the sand, the WNBA isn't just in damage control. It's in full-blown identity crisis mode. And here's the brutal truth. This was avoidable. The warning signs were right there, flashing in neon. For years, players were telling anyone who would listen, the league system doesn't work. The pay is too low. The structure is too rigid. The leadership is too slow to respond to what women's sports actually need in 2025. But instead of innovating, the WNBA dug in, kept operating like it was a niche sideshow instead of a billion-dollar brand with serious momentum. And now, the players are done waiting for the league to catch up. This wasn't some rash protest or emotional overreaction. It was a calculated rejection from athletes who understand their worth and their options. Because for the first time in a long time, women's basketball players have options. And that's the part that should scare the WNBA the most. The era of this is your only shot is officially over. Unrivaled exists. It's not theoretical anymore. It's real. It's funded. It's backed by stars. And it's being built for players. By players. From the ground up. That alone changes everything. It gives athletes leverage. It shifts the negotiating power. And it sends a crystal clear message to league execs everywhere. Evolve or get left behind. Now think about what that means for the WNBA's future. Because it's not just about money anymore. It's about loyalty, trust, credibility. When your own stars don't believe you're working in their best interests, when they start looking elsewhere, when they start building elsewhere, that's not just a business risk. That's an existential threat. This is no longer a battle over a contract. This is a referendum on the league's values. Caitlin Clark refusing the deal wasn't a personal move. It was a collective statement, and one that echoed through every locker room in the league. If she won't sign, if the most high-profile rookie in WNBA history, the one breaking records and dominating headlines, won't take your historic deal, then why would anyone else? That silence you hear from WNBA headquarters, that's the sound of panic. Because without that CBA, everything freezes. And without Engelbert at the helm, there's no one steering the ship through this storm. And sure, they'll name a replacement. They'll patch the leak with press releases and talking points. But the players aren't here for optics anymore. They want action. They want structural change. And unless leadership brings something radically different to the table, this lockout talk is going to turn into reality. The 2026 season could be the price for this misstep. That's not speculation. That's the path we're on. And you have to ask, How did it get to this point? How did a league with record media deals, rising attendance, viral moments, and the most exciting generation of talent ever end up here, on the verge of collapse, bleeding leadership, and staring down a potential lockout? It's the same story we've seen across sports and entertainment. A system built for a different era, refusing to relinquish control. A league too proud to admit it needs to share power. Management that views players as employees rather than stakeholders. And now, it's blowing up in their faces. The WNBA had a golden opportunity. They could have restructured everything, made the players real partners, aligned the business model with modern fandom and athlete-driven media. Instead, they offered a raise and expected applause. But the players have outgrown that version of the league. This generation isn't afraid to demand more. They're not scared of walking away. They know their platforms are powerful. Their fans are loyal. Their value is measurable. And they are no longer satisfied being the faces of a system that doesn't invest in their future. So now, the WNBA is standing at the edge. There's still a chance to pull back. Still a chance to fix this. But only if they accept what's really happening here. This isn't about one commissioner resigning. It's about the collapse of an old-school mentality. If the league wants to survive, it needs more than a new CBA. It needs a whole new vision. One where players aren't just performers. They're partners. Where leadership doesn't just tolerate empowerment, it centers it. Where the billion-dollar revenue is reflected in how the people generating it are treated. Because here's what's not coming back. The old status quo. That's done. And if the WNBA can't admit that, they're not just risking a lockout, they're risking their legacy. So, what's your take? Should the WNBA blow it all up and rebuild from scratch? Do you think the league's leadership will finally wake up, or are they too deep in denial? Would you watch a full, unrivaled season if it meant better pay and control for players? Drop your thoughts in comments. Give this video a like if you're here for the drama and the justice. And subscribe if you want to stay on top of the biggest stories breaking down the old guard. Because one thing's clear, the revolution in women's sports isn't coming. It's already here.